Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the next session, a discussion with Dr. Mona Nemer and Dr. Sethuraman Panchanathan. Dr. Nemer, Canada's Chief Science Advisor, has been a longtime friend of the CSPC, and we are glad to have them here again this year. We are also excited to have Dr. Panchanathan, or as they introduce themselves to me, Dr. Punch, the Director of the U.S. National Science Foundation. And as they are the first NSF Director to speak at CSPC, we are very pleased to have them with us today. I will now welcome Dr. Alejandro Adam, the President of NSERC, to the stage to moderate this session.
The first question is, can you hear us? Yes? Test of your mics, everything okay? All right.
Hi.
Well,
Yes.
okay, it's a real pleasure for us to be here, in particular for me to have the opportunity to moderate this conversation between Dr. Mona Nemer and Dr. Panchanathan. Oh, of course this was going to happen. Who from now on will be referred to, if you permit, as Panch and Mona?
Absolutely.
Okay. And for me, this is a very exciting opportunity because not only are they very good friends, but they're also real inspirations to me, role models, not only here in North America, but from across the world. So and when I'm asked to moderate, the first thing I thought was, who can moderate Mona and Panch? These guys are not moderates in any way. And you'll see from the passion of their answers what this means. So Mona, as you heard, she's our Chief Science Advisor, a distinguished scientist. She has been Chief Science Advisor since 2017. And the leadership that she has provided to science in Canada is just incredibly remarkable. And we owe her a great debt of gratitude. Her role during the pandemic, of course, is also outstanding and remarkable. Panch, well, Director of NSF, appointed in, I guess, approved in 2020 by Congress. Computer scientist, inventor, real personality in the United States and around the world, a brilliant leader, and in case you don't know, and maybe it wasn't in his biography, Panch has a PhD from the University of Ottawa. And he tells me his first grant was from NSERC. Yes. So it can't get any better than that, right? So, all right. So Panch is a great friend of Canada, and I really want to appreciate what he does for us, for our whole community, in always arguing that Canada should be included in these international engagements. All right, so we're going to start with these questions. So some of the questions will go first to one individual, and then we'll switch to the second person. And let me go on to these questions then. Carefully vetted questions. We'll see. Okay. Now, the conference's theme is Science and Innovation in a Time of Transformation. How does science help address societally relevant priorities, especially in a changing landscape? And what do we need to be doing now and 5 to 10 years into the future in order to ensure that science is addressing pressing local and global challenges? And I'll pass it over to Panch.
Thank you very much. Really great to be here, Alejandro, and with friends, Alejandro and Mona. Mona and I share something in common. We are from the University of Ottawa. So, it's good to have Ottawa in the stage together. It's like second home. So coming back and seeing the snowfall today brought back a lot of memories. I've lived here for 11 years. As a graduate student, as a faculty at the University of Ottawa, skated on the canal. My wife is Canadian. And both my children were born in Canada. If that does not give you enough insight in terms of my Canadian connections. So thrilled and delighted to be back. Let's talk about science. This is a moment of transformation, as you had mentioned, Alejandro. And let me give you 2 examples of things that we have seen firsthand that has really demonstrated the impact of science. The COVID moment really brought to life the importance of fundamental research, the importance of sustained investments in fundamental and basic science, and then in translational efforts, and then in carrying that through investments with early stage entrepreneurship, and then working with industry. All of the above. If you would recall, the PCR test was actually an investment in the 1960s by NSF for a bacteria in the Yellowstone National Park. Okay? You see how long sometimes science does take to have tremendous impact. NSF invested very early in the 70s in terms of 3D printing, additive manufacturing, and you all know how it came to the moment, to meet the moment in COVID. Now we are talking about AI as a technology. We are going to spend more time, I'm sure, talking in the future questions about AI. But AI and the proliferation of AI, I keep reminding people that AI of today is a sustained investment for 5 to 6 decades in computing efforts. It did not just magically appear. In fact, AI was invested in by NSF as the largest non-defense funder of AI and computing work, even through AI winters. When people gave up, NSF continued investing. And here we are, looking at the amazing possibilities, the opportunities, but also the challenges and how we are going to work through all of this. So that gives you a good example of how transformation is possible by investing in basic and fundamental research and then carrying that through. So you asked about this moment today. This moment, clearly, and that's why this conference is very vital, this moment demands, expects us to work across disciplines seamlessly. And again, I invoke AI. The challenges that we face with AI are because I would submit that we did not bring the social behavioral scientist. We did not bring the humanists. We did not bring the policy experts at the beginning of the creation of AI technologies, but after the fact. And therefore, we are now doing band-aids rather than proactive approaches in terms of building what we think are elegant ways of advancing with technological solutions. So this moment, therefore, challenges us to think across disciplines seamlessly, work across disciplines seamlessly. But also this moment is challenging us to strengthen at speed and scale, because the problems out there, whether it is climate, whether it is the next pandemic, whatever those grand challenge problems are, requires us to hyper-partner, to work at speed and scale. And when we talk about 5 to 10 years from now, I have only one thing that I will tell you in the interest of time. If we do not, in all our nations, and I remind this in the United States, and I'm sure it's true in Canada, if we do not unleash every ounce of talent in our nations, talent across all geographies, talent everywhere, and make possible opportunities everywhere, and also work towards investing and cultivating and nurturing innovation anywhere across our nations, we would not have done justice for what needs to be unleashed for the future. And therefore, the 5 to 10 years and beyond is how we ensure opportunities are everywhere, innovation can be anywhere, and that's what we need to intensely focus on. How can science, technology, innovation ensure that we are able to provide that kind of a future for all our citizens everywhere? Back to you, Alejandro.
Mona, your comments on this.
Pas sûr, qu'est-ce que je peux ajouter? Tout d'abord, bon après-midi, bienvenue à Ottawa. Alors, Panch a non seulement été professeur, mais il a eu la permanence, ce qui veut dire qu'il parle aussi français. Alors voilà, bravo. I mean, building on what Panch has said, of course, I'll give maybe just a couple of quick examples. I think, you know, when we talk right now about the major challenges, everybody has in mind energy transition, climate change, and of course, human health. And we think that we have the knowledge that we need to just basically apply it and get solutions. The reality is, I think we can broadly think that we have maybe a third of the knowledge that we need. We have some things we need to scale them. There are other things that we need to still find out about. And there are other things that are available, but we need to deploy them. And in all cases, we need science, because people think often about science as basically using it for finding out about the problem. Well, science helps us understand the problem, helps us find solutions, and also helps us monitor how well we're doing and implementing the appropriate solutions. So I think we need to keep this in mind when we talk about transformation. It would be a huge transformation to start using science for implementation purposes and for monitoring as well. We're often asked these days, should we be doing applied science? We can't afford to do more basic science. And Panch, you mentioned about the vaccines and the pandemic. I'm going to now reveal my age here, but I did my PhD on RNA synthesis. And by the way, my PhD supervisor almost lost his answer grant because some comment was about who on earth will ever need to use synthetic RNA. So I rest the case. So I think we need to have the humility of not imagining that we can, foresee and forecast the future, and that by itself, I think, would be a transformation. Just some humility, finding out more. After all, human beings want to understand themselves, want to understand their universe, and it's guaranteed that one day it will be applied to something when we're no longer around to see it.
Thank you. I couldn't agree with you more. Is this working or not? Yes? Yeah. Okay. Very good. No, the next topic we're going to talk about is about open science, because if you do great science, well, you want people to have access to it very broadly. So let's start with Mona. Mona, we know you've been a champion for open science, and some of our audience members here may be familiar with the roadmap for open science that your office produced a few years ago. In your view, why is open science so important? How would you respond to those who think that open science and research security are incompatible?
Well, thank you for the question. Why is open science important? Well, imagine the COVID pandemic, and imagine that we did not have access, all of us, to publications on COVID, to data on COVID, and to even newspaper articles on COVID. I think that we've experienced this, we know how good it is, and we should just move forward and never go back. So there are a lot of misconceptions about open science. Some people think, for example, that thinking about open science means you can get patents. Well, that's like really a false assumption. In fact, probably patents are the best place where you get all sorts of information, open about how to do the experiments, how to repeat it, how to do this, how to do that. So that's one thing. The other place where people also mistakenly think that security and open science are incompatible is by thinking that secure science means closed science, behind walls and doors and everything. And of course, there are some types of science and investigations that you don't want to release. I mean, the countries, people, organizations have done this for years, for national security reason most of the time. But in fact, research security and secure data and science is essential for open science, because you don't want people tampering with the data, you don't want people tampering with the things that are open, which is why I like to talk about security hygiene. And I think that we have a long ways to go in our academic institutions in terms of best practices, in terms of awareness and in terms of, the tools that we need, that our institutions need to help the researchers secure their science. So there's absolutely, no, they're not opposite. They go hand in hand. And the sooner we understand this, the better it is.
Thank you very much. Mona?
Excellent
please
points,
jump in.
Mona. How do we solve a problem like climate change if science is not open? So the scientific values, the core scientific values are openness, transparency, reciprocity, research integrity, and respect for intellectual property, and a whole host of such values. When we talk about partners who are working together, and when we talk about research security, it's about partners who are like-minded, who believe in these fundamental values, the scientific values, so that we may advance our ideas into the future. COVID, again, taking that example, because of the fact we shared data, because of the fact that we shared our approaches that we were taking, is why we were able to converge into solutions as fast as we could and had a real impact. So, open science is an exceedingly important concept. I agree with Mona that we have to therefore look at that from the angle of actually research security being much more robust when we have appropriate open science principles grounded in these values that I talked about. At NSF, for example, just in September, we had a $10.4 million grant by the Geosciences Directorate on openness, equity, and so on. We partnered with 5 agencies in terms of building a prototype open knowledge network at $20 million scale. We're constantly looking at this. We just, in the newly announced Technology Innovation Partnerships Directorate, we had a POSE program, Pathways for Open Science Ecosystem. We are constantly at it because we believe in this. We believe that that's where you make progress. That's where you solve global grand challenge problems, because science is global. And therefore, it's very important to keep that in context. At the same time, being very respectful of what we need to do relative to national security and other aspects that we need to be mindful of, and putting the appropriate guardrails in place. So it's not one versus the other, it is one and the other. And of course they coexist, and they are highly intertwined in terms of how we look at the future.
Thank you both. Okay, now let's talk about accessibility of research outcomes. And I want to point out that the 3 of us have very diverse backgrounds. Panch from India, came from India originally. Mona, Lebanon. Me, I came from Mexico. So we're from all over the world, here in North America.
It's Canada.
And this is Canada,
That's
US.
United States.
It's the diversity, right? Very important. So, so as we know, there's an ongoing and increasing focus on increasing the accessibility of STEM and broadening participation in science and research. This is to you, Panch, first. Can you talk about why this is such an important area for investment and what initiatives you are advancing to help support a variety of pathways into science?
Thank you so much. It's a very, very important question, Alejandro. I think they've switched off my mic because I don't need a mic. So, so I don't even ask the question, is my mic on? Maybe not. They said, well, let's shut him off. This is not the first place. It won't be the last place either. So having said that, and talking about accessibility, one of the central pillars at NSF is about inclusion accessibility. And this is what I talked about, I touched upon in my response to the first question, which is that how can we guarantee opportunities everywhere? We all know that talent and ideas are democratized. It's in every community, rural, urban, across the broad socioeconomic demographic, across the rich diversity of our nations. The question is, how do we ensure that such a talent get access to the opportunities? We have a plethora of programs at NSF, and I'm not going to advertise them here. I know you all can surf the NSF website and get a good understanding of that. But I'm going to talk about one new program that we launched just a year and a half ago. When I came to NSF, I realized that while NSF is very robust, just to put that in perspective, just the recent Nobel laureates that were announced, The Nobel laureates in physics, chemistry, and economics were all funded by NSF early in their careers. NSF counts 262 Nobel laureates and still advancing the aspirations of young researchers. So we're very proud of that. So the fact that NSF is investing, you find that the portfolio of NSF investments are primarily, rightly so, targeted where the best ideas come from, to the gold standard merit review process, and that's always the way in which we should fund research. The best ideas should be invested in. But it turns out that most of those universities that we invest in, and I'm sure it's true in Canada too, that it is not a surprise when you look at the institutions that we invest in. You'll say, of course, of course, of course, of course. But the institutions that get left behind in the United States are minority-serving institutions, research 2 institutions, community colleges, and a whole range of institutions that hardly get any investment of NSF. How do you change this? Like myself and Mona, we led the research offices in our institutions. If you look at these institutions which are successful, you will find that a primary ingredient in that success is a research office that finds out where the opportunities are, connects the faculty and their expertise to those opportunities, helps them with grant writing, possibly even pre-reviews their grants, helps them with forming partnerships, helps them with sorting in intellectual property issues, compliance issues, and others, so that the faculty with great ideas can then submit those proposals and garner the success through the gold standard merit review process. How can you expect that of institutions that don't have such a research officer capacity? It is a downward spiral. Those institutions and people who work in those institutions and their ideas will never have a chance of being invested in. And yet, most of our diverse students end up going to those institutions, by the way. And so when we talk about true diversity of ideas and talent, how do you expect to nurture them if those institutions are not going to be successful? So what we did at NSF is, when I came to NSF, I said, how might we transform this by not just talking about it, also investing in a plethora of programs, but go to the heart of it. And that program is called GRANTED. It's an acronym: Growing Research Access Through Nationally Transformative Equity and Diversity. If we are good at something at NSF, it's acronyms.
Ottawa also were good.
Ottawa also good, yes. That must have been the water that I drank in Ottawa. So the granted program, simply put, is a research office infrastructure that is available to those institutions that don't have such a research office, so that their faculty, their students, and researchers can get access to this set of services that they can use to be able to transcend their ideas through the gold standard merit review process and get invested in. And this is how you make a change in terms of now the downward spiral becoming slowly an upward spiral. And guess what? If you do this right, then faculty will want to go to those institutions and be part of those institutions too. And so you build this ecosystem of excellence everywhere across the United States and beyond. So that's what we're focused on. And there are a whole other set of programs I won't have the time to go into. And so I'm just going to stop there.
Thank you, Pen. I'm sure that certainly resonates here in Canada, too. Absolutely. Mona.
Well, I mean, I'll just add that, first of all, science is for everyone, and everyone ought to have the opportunity to contribute to science. And when we talk about access and when we talk about inclusion, I think we need to remember that this has to happen at multiple places. I mean, you mentioned at the institutions level. Sometimes it's just giving people the opportunity to learn about science, to bring them in, help them at this very early stage. But we can't stop there. It would just be too simple. I think we need to take a good look at our institutions, our science workplaces. Are they welcoming or not? Are we supportive of promotion of diverse people? As you all know, I've been a champion for women in science for a long time. And I learned something, I hope it's true, but I'll tell you what I learned, and then you can check. That patents that are taken out by women are actually more durable. They are, I guess they're more innovative, so when they're challenged, they still stand the test of time. So I thought that was interesting. And of course we have diverse people in our communities, and maybe I'll address the folks who have not traditionally have access to science, and where science is very important to them and to their lives, and that's our indigenous communities. I mean, testing your water, building your houses, ensuring biodiversity in your environment is extremely important to our indigenous communities. And I'm just so proud maybe to share with you that my office co-led the development of the iSTEM cluster in the government, so that's Indigenous in STEM. And that's a group that is really becoming the go-to place to promote and understand also Indigenous culture, ways of doing within government and outside of government. And maybe I'll conclude for the interest of time of reminding everyone that my first youth council group actually put out their vision for science, and there is an incredible chapter on diversity, which I invite you to all read, and just a little bit pressure on some of my now new youth council members to do something as great in terms of all the challenges that we're talking about.
Thank you, Mona. All right, we're going to move on to science diplomacy. We know it's a very trendy concept, gaining a lot of traction. Mona, to you, how important is the role of science in international relations? And can you give us an example of where you see it being particularly useful?
I'm glad that science diplomacy is becoming trendy again, because it was trendy, then it stopped being trendy, and now it's trendy again. So it's just like, fashion, so you might as well keep your good old clothes. They'll come back. Science diplomacy is extremely important, and science has to be considered and used a lot more than what we're doing now as a tool in our international relations. And whether we're talking about our international development efforts, whether we're talking about our international science collaborations for science policies, you name it. I think that in Canada we can be very, very proud of our science strength, and we ought to use it everywhere, to brag about it to start off with, and also to use it internationally. I mean, some people think that we're at a time that is reminiscent of the Cold War. And, whether you agree or not, there are certainly a lot of geopolitical tensions, and a lot of it centers actually around science and technology. So this is definitely an area that we can use for peace, for prosperity, everywhere rather than for conflict. And you all remember the International Space Station, the Sesame Accelerator in the Middle East, where everyone works together for peace. So I think that we really need to be refocused on this and use science as much as we can as actually a common language and common value across the world.
Thank you, Mona. Very inspiring.
No, excellent points, Mona. What I want to add is that without science diplomacy, we will not be able to solve the grand challenges of the time, because science is a way in which you understand problems, find solutions to problems, but then through that, you're able to build trust and engender a lot of confidence in the public of various nations to want to appreciate the fact that this partnership which we have among nations is important, and that it is focused on wellness, focused on delivering prosperity for people. And so science diplomacy is a way in which we have a responsibility as scientists to be able to show the prosperity and to show the potential and the promise and deliver on the impact. I think this is very, very important. And once we do that, then the diplomacy that science is used as a diplomacy then becomes even more empowered and be able to deliver the value that we are looking for in terms of building partnerships with various nations. But I will be remiss if I don't say this, because we may not have a chance on this unless some question comes about. One of the things I find that we need to do when we talk about diplomacy is also diplomacy right at home. Science is not as well understood, and its impact, the importance, among our own citizenry. So we all have a responsibility to be able to now talk about science, and not just about the excitement of science, but actually talk about the impact of science, and talk about everything that one faces in terms of the daily activities, what science has done to provide that kind of prosperity, what technology has done to change people's outcomes in terms of life, happiness, whatever that is that people care about. I think it's very, very important that we translate this constantly. As scientists, if we don't take that responsibility, I always say, oftentimes I find people will tell me, but they don't understand science. And I said, be very careful, because when you point a finger at someone, there are 3 fingers pointing back at you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Thank you, Mona.
So we all have a responsibility first, before we point a finger, to see, have we done enough as scientists? And this diplomacy, therefore, is about also what we do in our nations, with our citizenry, all across our nations. And then, of course, that becomes a tool for guaranteeing international collaborations and partnerships. And at NSF, I'm very proud to say that in the last year, we launched a Global Centers program, not just only working on episodic partnerships and partnerships at a smaller scale, but these Global Centers program, we just announced the results of the Global Centers. Absolutely. The first one, Canada is a partner, UK, Canada, Australia, and the United States. We worked together in terms of creating a Global Centers program on climate and clean energy. We collectively invested $80 million. So these are not small projects, okay? And US invested $30 million, NSF invested $30 million in terms of the 7 projects that are going to do unbelievable work in terms of bringing researchers from various, institutions in the 4 nations to be able to actually solve the problems. And so we're going to be at it in terms of seeing how these global centers and other frameworks that we're working with Canada. Again, we don't have time. There are many, many frameworks that we have with Canada. We're very excited by that in terms of AI quantum with NSERC, right? And so we do a lot of that partnership kind of mindset that also helps build this scientific credibility that is important as you're thinking about science diplomacy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I may add that science diplomacy between the U.S. and Canada is quite strong. And since you came in, Panch, we've noticed that warm relations with Canada, and there are a number of venues for collaboration. And I believe there's a STNI agreement between the 2 countries, which is being cooked up once they get over the IP issues. Right? Okay. Okay. All right. Now we're going to open this up to the audience. I see some numbers in front of me. I'm a mathematician. I see a 19 and I see an 01. So anyway, someone will have to stop us when you're ready for us to stop. So we're going to open this up to the audience. Questions, and I suppose we have mics out there. So, all right, here we go. Somebody's raised his hand. There we go. Where it is? Okay. Line up.
Yep.
If you want.
Yeah, okay, this is working. Thank you very much for the amazing discussion. It's very tempting to ask Panch after 11 years at Ottawa, why did he move to the US? But we might not be ready to hear that answer, so I'm not going to go there. You started off with talking about interdisciplinarity and the need for interdisciplinarity in this.
Can you hold the mic closer, please?
In this day and age, need for different disciplines to work together in this day and age, and I couldn't agree more. But the challenge we often see is the common language between these different, a biologist talking to a data scientist, talking to a mathematician, talking to an engineer. So are there any words of advice how we can kind of bring these groups together and create an environment where there's a common language where these different industries can talk to each other?
No, that's an excellent question. The common language, simply to start with, is our collective desire to solve a problem. It starts right there. Because once you commit yourself to wanting to solve the problem, then you build respect for the different disciplines that needs to contribute in order for us to find the solution. As we all know, climate is not just a science problem or just an engineering problem or a social problem or a behavioral problem or a policy problem or a legal problem. I can go on and on and on. Humanity's problem, human problem. It's all of the above and more. So which means that when you start to work together, there will be these language differences. Having lived in an institution before I came to NSF, where this was what we really worked in and day out, where we need to bring facilitators to be able to bring people together and help the translation process. Sometimes scientists don't necessarily talk to each other as easily or understand each other easily, or they just, talk past each other, right? So we have found that bringing facilitators in who are able to help bring the neutrality around the concept that we are trying to solve and the translation that happens has been very helpful. And so there are techniques and tools today, and then there is a science of science research even these days, of interdisciplinary science research. So all of these are increasingly helping people to want to work with each other, understand each other, respect each other, and therefore be able to go past the language differences, as you said, to the mission, union of mission, and therefore that way you're able to get more problems solved. I can tell you, just 3 years ago when I came to NSF, you're going to hear a lot of this, we launched 25 AI institutes in the last 3 years. Each of them $20 million, $500 million just on AI institutes. Okay? We just announced the third cycle. And this $500 million of AI institutes investments, we just had a showcase of the 25 AI institutes in Congress, in the Hill, because I wanted the congressional members to see the amazing work that is happening in agriculture and in weather and this and that. So you see the people that are working together, they are working seamlessly together. So I think we are transcending that bottleneck that is there, because there is a real desire to want to do that. And guess what? Money always helps. And Mona and Alejandro will tell you that, right? That this is something that we all find, it's magic. Somehow people want to talk to each other when there is money.
That's what we're here for.
Okay.
Thank you. So we're going to alternate between mics. Now, please keep your questions short.
And answer short too, I guess.
Even shorter. Okay.
That's a silent, that's my good friend who's saying,
Oui, bonjour. Merci beaucoup. Merdad, félicitations for 15 years, your board, your team. It's fantastic volunteers. It's an incredible organization and great magazine. I wanted to, you had a great discussion around Next Gen. For me, Next Gen is so critical. And one of the things you never hear about, or rarely, in the Canadian scene, it's a little different than the US scene, but I would welcome your comments on what should we be doing about science education in our K-12 system? Because I think it's all well and good to talk about who's showing up at universities and colleges and SAGEPs, et cetera, but science education in the K-12 setting is the next big thing, in my view. Anyway, I would welcome your comments. Merci beaucoup.
A great question. Mona, you want to?
Well, that's really a super important question, but the answer is not like, a two-liners. I completely agree that we need to be looking into science pedagogy. I think a lot of research needs to happen there. Talk about, convergence between NSERC maybe and SHRC, because it has to be, and CIHR and everyone else. It has to be everybody's business. And I think it impacts the earlier question and also, goes back to our approach to science. I think that, we need to make science interesting. I often say that we should be teaching fourth-year courses at university and then go back to the first year, because they're, a lot more interesting. And I think that in terms of education, there's technology, there's case studies, and there are the educators themselves. And if you're not passionate about what you're teaching, well, guess what? Even if you have the best material, it just is not going to happen. So I think this is a case where provincial governments, federal government, associations have to work, institutions have to work together to change this, because otherwise we're going to be in big trouble.
Absolutely. Teachers really need our support.
teachers are-
Yeah.
That's right.
And they need to be better paid.
Well, of course. Over to Jeff.
So Dr. Panch, you threw out a challenge to the scientists in the room to take more responsibility about the impacts of their work on society and the economy. And the reward system within academia doesn't reward for that. It tends to reward for published papers, et cetera. So I'm really, I know you set up the Technology Innovation Partnership Program, the TIP program, and I know there were some voices in the US who didn't want that to go into NSF because they were afraid that the culture of the science culture that was sort of anti-impact or really focused on the basic side, that it wouldn't work. Now it is in NSF, and it's about 1.5 years old now. I'd love your story on how it's going, and any advice that you have for the Canadian policy and institutional community about how to deal with that problem.
Excellent question again. I think you're referring to, when I came to NSF, one of the first things I wanted to get done fast, is a new directorate in NSF called the Technology Innovation Partnerships Directorate, called the TIP Directorate, to tip the balance. This is the first new directorate at NSF in 31 years. This is a cross-cutting directorate so that all the fantastic scientific innovations that are happening in the various directorates can be rapidly pulled in partnership with industry, economic development ecosystems, venture capital systems, and all of the things that work together. And then also to see how that partnership then energizes even more basic research in all of the directorates. And you asked me, how is it going? And let me tell you, there are 8 different programs that have been launched. The directorate was launched within 1 year, a record time. And all the 8 programs were launched in the next 6 to 8 months. And one of the programs that I will talk about very quickly is the Regional Innovation Engine program. When I talked about innovation can be anywhere, it's not just talk, but we said, let's put it in action. I said, if innovation is everywhere, let's, through the Regional Innovation Engines, surface all the amazing innovation concepts that's everywhere. And the Type 1 program, we had 670 concept papers submitted from all across the United States, all territories included. And then we published them online, which is unusual for NSF to do, so that people can see each other, what other is doing, and then they can hyper-partner. And then we had a few hundred proposals. We immediately invested in 44 of them, spanning 46 states. And a second type, that is each $1 million, and there are amazing stories. If there's another question, I'll tell you 1 or 2 stories. But the Type 2, which is $160 million scale, we are in the process of finalizing it, 16 finalists, again, spanning all parts of the nation. So this is about, when I talk about speed and scale, there's no time to do hand-wringing, thinking, oh, I can't get it done. No, there's no time for that. There's no time for this. We have to move fast.
I just want to add one thing on the question, because it was about the culture of the reward culture. And I know that there are many people from universities and the granting council and government here. So I really want to send you an appel, s'il vous plaît, get together and review your excellence criteria. I think that when we talk about open science, when we talk about innovation, when we talk about group work, about team effort, multidisciplinarity, we need to be mindful of how our reward system is actually an impediment to many of these things. Thank you.
Excellent point, Mona. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your thoughtful comments. I'm president of the Canadian Black Scientists Network and also on the board of directors for Support Our Science, which is a group advocating to get salaries of postdocs and graduate students in Canada above the poverty line. I want to talk about these issues with respect to the comment that you made with respect to minority-serving institutions actually getting less funding. In Canada, we used to have a fundamental research funding program that was essentially relatively equitably spreading funding across the country. If you're in a tiny little institution in the far north, you could get a NSERC grant in the same way as you could if you're University of Toronto, as I am, and with one of those research offices. We no longer really have that system, and I know it's because of flat funding amounts. But the question is, in the current context, when it's hard for researchers at smaller institutions to get grants, and even if they get top scholarship students, those people are at or below the poverty line, how do we solve that in Canada? We heard about your program at the NSF. I'd love to hear about what we're going to do in Canada to solve that problem.
All right. Rona.
Well, maybe Alejandro, you want to answer this question.
Let the moderator speak.
I'm sorry.
I'll just say that, I mean, you know, there are several things that we can do and things we can change in our existing programs. For example, when we give, first of all, I want it to be very clear that I'm 100% with the increase in the number and the value of the scholarship and the fellowships. And I think that, you know, we have to make this, the students and the fellows in charge of where they want to go rather than the institutions in terms of attracting them. So I think, you know, it's an interesting policy issue that is not that complicated to do. And then when, you know, talk about open science, for example, you know, the institutions spend a lot of time for subscriptions that they can redirect actually to research and to attracting and supporting people. So I think that's another issue. And the third one, of course, governments in general, I think, have a role to play in terms of supporting institutions, small or large, because actually the smaller institutions are so important in their regions. They're more important than the University of Toronto is to Toronto, with all due respect. So I think that it's in everybody's best interest that we think about these issues and develop the appropriate policies.
Yeah, I'll just say we have to reset and reaffirm the model. And that'll take investments, time, and smart thinking. Alicia, over to you.
Thank you, Alejandro. This has been a great panel. Thank you. I'm Alicia Main. I'm the Associate Vice President of Knowledge Mobilization and Innovation at Simon Fraser University. And my question is for Dr. Pench. You spoke about the new directorate, the TIP directorate, and I believe within that is Activate, which includes an elements of, you know, academic, government, industry leadership, and commercialization postdocs. I wonder if you could speak briefly to that new program and your vision of how we can bring fundamental science to commercialization a little bit more quickly.
Well, thank you. I think you're referring to the program that we worked with InQtel, in terms of building entrepreneurial fellowships. See, as part of the TIP Directorate, we have a number of programs. I talked about the regional innovation agents. We have programs in partnership with industry. Also, an Excellent is a program in terms of experiential training for people who are already, trying to switch from one area to another area and being able to take advantage of that. There is a program that is focused on ensuring the minority-serving institutions and the institutions that don't have access to be able to connect to innovation networks, being able to connect to innovation networks. So I would strongly encourage you to check out all these programs. But the program that you're talking about, I think, is related to entrepreneurial fellowships, which is essentially what we have said is that our Innovation Core Program, or I-Core program, is essentially a small amount of infusion of capital that we give to people who already have an NSF grant. I was an I-Core recipient also as a faculty member. And you go to a boot camp, and then you learn all the things about Steve Blank's curriculum in terms of, launching companies and so on and so forth. But then companies either do very well and then attain angel and venture capital investment and so on, and SBIR, STTR program investments. But we also want to make sure that individuals are able to get real, immersive entrepreneurial training and mentorship. So this entrepreneurial fellowship program is a 2 to 3 year investment in terms of significant stipends given to people, PhD students, to be able to take on this as something that if they are keen to express their entrepreneurial talent, that it's a sustained investment not only in terms of money, but also connecting them to entrepreneurial networks, and as well as with mentors and so on, so they can actually express their entrepreneurial aspirations. And so this is there's a program that we have launched already, and we want to scale this rapidly. If I might chime in the previous question, one of the things that we also should look at when we talk about stipends and so on, we have to be more creative as scientists. Yes, we look to federal government to solve all the problems. Yes, that's okay. It's all right. But we also have to find interesting partnerships with industry and others who do benefit from these, and to see if we can hyperwire partnerships to be able to see how we can work on this, graduate student stipend investments, co-investments, and so on. So I just want to leave that thought there, and because whatever we do, it will still not be enough.
Absolutely. Here we have the MyTax program that does that for internships. Okay, our last question is from a Nobel Prize winner, no less. Art, please.
So I'll address this to Panch particularly. You mentioned the challenge of AI. What's your perspective on the internationalization of sensible regulations and not unduly repressive regulations on AI? I know there's an executive order that's happening in the US, but we really need something that's going to be international in its scope. What's your perspective on that, and is it moving as fast as we need?
Yeah. No, I think it's a very, very good point, and you referenced the executive order. The president signed it 2 weeks ago. We were in the White House with him, and it has, in my view, and having been part of the evolution, in my view, it's a very balanced approach in terms of ensuring the opportunities are given the fullest possibilities to express itself, but at the same time ensuring that we have guardrails put in place that ensures that fear that is there. Fear is never a good emotion in my view, because it does not allow you to take full advantage of opportunities. So how do we, through the guardrails, ensure that we're able to manage these things, the fear and the worry and all that, manage it in a way, and for which we need multilateral partnerships. It cannot be done by just only, academia or federal agencies partaking in this. It is actually bringing in industry early in the conversation. I was so impressed that President Biden had a number of convenings in the White House in terms of various AI industries coming together and talking about this and having them participate in this, volunteering to provide resources in terms of addressing the issue. And I'm so proud of the fact that our Congress, Senator Schumer and the AI caucus in the Senate, Senator Heinrich and Senator Rounds, and I was in one of the AI panels. I was amazed by the number of senators who were there present for the AI panel. It shows the deep commitment in Congress. It shows a deep commitment in the White House. It shows a deep commitment in industry, of course, academia, and working with all of that. But the last aspect of it, which you are alluding to, is how do we work with our international partners? So that when we are building this, this is something that transcends the boundaries of nations. And as you know, the recent AI summit that happened in London, there were some ideas that the European partners have put together. And so you will find that these different ideas that are there are hopefully going to converge sooner than later in terms of having a much more balanced approach all across the globe to realize the opportunities. I hope I addressed your question, but if not, we can have a one-on-one conversation too.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll just say that this is such a rapidly moving field, and policy actually is not that fast. So we run the real thing of being behind the 8th ball. So I think it's really important to agree on principles. And in this, I'm not saying that we don't need laws and so on eventually, but I think that there has to be agreement on principles, and that those agreements have to be international. They can't be just like one country versus the other. And we talk about science diplomacy again here. That's, I think, would be a perfect example. And I'll just remind the younger folks in the audience who were perhaps not born when we had the same conversations about biotechnologies, several decades ago, that there are a lot of lessons that can be learned from there. So we don't need to be reinventing the wheel every time. But I think this is an extremely important area where countries have to work together.
Thank you.
That's why this conference and the policy folks engaging early in the technology and science is exceedingly important if we want to make sure that we are building responsible and policies that can actually make science flourish and technology flourish.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And I should mention that Canada is very engaged on this. I know Minister Champagne was at the UK AI Summit himself, so yeah, there's a lot of action on that. Okay, well, I think this wraps us up. As you proved, you're not moderatable, which is great. Otherwise, it would have been very boring for me. So I want to thank you both.
I love being with Panch. He makes me look laid back.
Oh, come on. You're not laid back.
So,
Come on.
thank you both. I think this is a great experience for everyone here. Thank you for coming, Panch, coming to Ottawa.
Thank you.
And thanks for everyone for being here and the great questions. Thank you very much.